Good evening, and welcome to the Institute of Current World Affairs Virtual Gala. I'm Executive Director Gregory Pfeiffer. I'm happy so many old and new friends are joining us tonight to celebrate ICWA's 96th year. We have an exciting program, but before we begin, I want to thank Christian Mehta, Institute Trustee and Gala Chair, and Joe Batot, Vice Chairman and Development Chair, along with the Gala Benefit Committee and our board. Also our speakers and special guests and fellows, and all our generous supporters who made this evening possible. Thank you. If you'd like to donate during the program, there's a button below this video that will open a new window so you can continue to watch. Also below the video, please join our chat discussion if you'd like to say anything. Just type in your name and a chat box will open. We'll begin with a brief video that tells a little bit about the Institute's history and mission and who we are today. What do you do if it's 1920, the world has changed, and you don't want to be a nation of blundering Americans? If you're Charles Crane, you establish a unique foundation to bring wisdom to America's engagement with the world. Crane was a friend and advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, who attended the Paris Peace Conference ending World War I. He recognized that, as a new great power, the United States was outmaneuvered by its more experienced European allies. So he launched the Institute of Current World Affairs in 1925. Since then, ICWA has awarded fellowships to emerging experts in foreign affairs, enabling them to travel and learn, free of ties to government or business, to become a living endowment of wisdom, expertise, and detached judgment.
The Institute's early fellows included John Hazard, a young Harvard Law School graduate. In 1934, the Institute sent him to study law in the Soviet Union. When he returned, he helped found Columbia University's Russian Institute, now the Harriman Institute, and he became one of this country's most distinguished professors of international law. ICWA fellow Doak Barnett carried out his first intensive study of Chinese culture and politics in the 1940s. He went on to become one of the most prolific writers about China at the Brookings Institution and Columbia and Johns Hopkins universities. His experience and expertise helped persuade both Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon to end China's isolation, leading to the country's opening in 1972. Today, ICWA fellows continue to shape the national debate and influence international affairs.
The ICWA experience broadened my horizon to know various aspects and dimensions of Chinese life.
Cheng Li heads the John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings.
I think the quality of the fellowship is that it allows you patience. It allows you repertorial patience. It allows you just kind of lifestyle patience to figure out what it is you want to do.
Nicholas Schmidl writes for The New Yorker. Susie Hansen traveled abroad for the first time in her life as an ICWA fellow. Her time in Turkey formed the basis for her book, Notes on a Foreign Country, which forcefully returns to Charles Crane's concern that America's knowledge of a changing world is falling behind. She was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. ICWA transforms the lives and careers of emerging writers, academics, lawyers, and diplomats, as well as experts in finance, policy, and social activism.
ICWA to me is about fostering enlightened leadership and public service that's practical and relevant in the 21st century.
Willie Foote is the founder and CEO of Root Capital. The social investment fund finances sustainable farming in poor rural areas of Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. When the Institute was founded more than 9 decades ago, the United States had little knowledge about many parts of the world. Now, each day brings a torrent of facts from a complex, globalized world. But the resulting sea of information hardly makes us more informed, let alone better thinkers or more enlightened actors.
That's why the ICWA Fellowship is just as valuable as when it was conceived. ICWA develops deep understanding of foreign countries, languages, cultures, politics, and issues, the kind of wisdom future generations will need to ensure that America's global leadership remains founded on our ideas and our ideals.
My ICWA fellowship was from 2016 through 2018, and I was an ICWA fellow in Nigeria and also spent a little bit of time in Niger Republic, studying girls' education and women's health. During the course of my ICWA fellowship, I got to travel across Nigeria and spend some time in communities learning about the reasons why girls are not in school and what we can do to get more girls enrolled in school, because I knew that Nigeria had the highest number of girls who were out of school. So the experience really gave me a chance to understand some of the cultural and the social issues, even the issues in the academic structure. Through my ICWA fellowship, I was able to solidify my passion for girls' education and advancing women's health. Today, I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, here in the United States, and I work with Family Planning 2020 at the United Nations Foundation, where I support governments to ensure that women and girls have access to life-saving contraceptives. So thank you, ICWA, for a fantastic time, a fantastic 2 years in Nigeria. And it is my pleasure to welcome the current ICWA Fellows.
أهلا وسهلا بكم في الشرق الأوسط. My name is David Kenner. I'm the ICWA Fellow in Saudi Arabia. My work focuses on economic change in the kingdom and how the new generation of Saudis have been affected by the rapid transformation of their country. I'm greeting you from the Kingdom Tower, the largest skyscraper in Saudi Arabia, from the 99th floor. About 1,000 feet above the ground in the kingdom. What you see behind me is the capital, which is an incredibly diverse, rapidly expanding city. So much so that many of my Saudi friends from outside of the capital, when they visit, they don't even recognize entire areas of it after being gone for just a few months. What I'm so grateful for about my ICWA fellowship is that it has allowed me to explore how the changes at the top are filtering down and affecting people throughout society and how they feel about those changes, to look at society not only from the top down but also the bottom up. My work has taken me to the homes of foreign workers in Riyadh, to the country's southern border with Yemen, to Bedouin weddings out in the desert of the Eastern Province. And none of this would have been possible without the trust and faith that ICWA put in me, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. With that, I just want to thank you. Have a wonderful gala, and over to you, Asta.
Namaste from India ICWA family. I'm here in New Delhi, India's capital city, where life has been a whirlwind since day one. 2 weeks after I arrived in India, we went into the world's largest lockdown, where places even like this tiny park in my neighborhood were shut off and people were confined to their homes for nearly 3 months. But in that time, I've had a chance to report on the sweeping effects of the pandemic, whether it's the hospitals that are now seeing an overwhelming second largest number of cases in the world, or the economy, which is seeing its deepest recession on record. But in this time, I've also had a chance to go deeper on the issues that I'm personally passionate about, like the rights of women and minorities. I've had a chance to speak with women in all areas of Indian life, whether it's doctors or lawyers, or informal workers. This experience has truly changed my life, and I'm so grateful that I get to do this every day. And now, hola, Elizabeth.
Buenas noches, Asta and ICWA. This is Elizabeth Hawkins in El Salvador. I left my immigration law practice in Seattle because I wanted to learn more about where my clients came from and what the stakes would be for them if they were forced to return. During my ICWA fellowship, I've been able to look at the immigration issue from various perspectives. I've spent time with farmers in the countryside, gang members in juvenile detention, criminal court judges and lawyers, Salvadoran refugees in Mexico, people who've been recently deported from the United States, and mostly with women and families who are just trying to make life work here. Despite the barriers of poverty, climate change, inequality, weak institutions, and a high crime rate, the people I've met are resourceful and creative. But going to the United States is always a possibility if things just prove too impossible here. Thank you to ICWA for this opportunity. And what's happening in Berlin, Emily?
Danke, Elizabeth. Hallo ICWA aus Deutschland. My ICWA fellowship has me based here in Berlin, focusing on the rise of right-wing populism across Germany and Central Europe. So much of what I focused on as an ICWA fellow has to do with history, the way that far-right politicians reshape and sometimes distort historical narratives and national narratives to suit their own political needs. Here in Berlin, history is everywhere, whether the rise of National Socialism in the 1930s or the divided Berlin of the Cold War era. This building behind me is a perfect example of that history and the way you can still see layers of it across the city today. Tempelhof was one of the first airports built in Berlin and in Germany. When the Nazis took power in the 1930s, they tried to redo it and wanted to design this airport as a symbol of the growing power of Germany in Europe and the world. After World War II, at the start of the Cold War, Tempelhof Airport was one of the primary access points for Allied forces to reach West Berlin. It's also the site of the Berlin Airlift in 1948 and 1949, where American and British forces organized more than 200,000 drops of key supplies for citizens of West Berlin. The airport closed for good in 2008, but it's still accessible to residents and citizens in Berlin. The whole airfield has been turned into a giant park and recreation space. Back in 2015, when more than 1 million refugees were arriving into the country, Tempelhof Airport was the site of temporary housing for some of those newcomers. On behalf of my fellow fellows, thank you so much for your support.
My ICWA Fellowship took place 2 decades ago in Russia. It actually began on the very first day of Vladimir Putin's presidency, and I was able to observe his authoritarian regime first taking shape. At one point, I found myself in the Moscow studios of the country's best independent television news station, NTV. Putin was just turning his attention to the then vibrant free press. The channel was under imminent threat of takeover, and its journalists had barricaded themselves inside. The director, Russia's most trusted news anchor, spoke to me in his office while strategizing with the who's who of opposition leaders. "The government wants to nationalize the channel because we ask questions," he told me between debonair drags on his cigarette. "For example, who was Mr. Putin?" "Other channels already have the answer," he said. "It's prepared for them in the Kremlin. He's a national hero, a genius." But when the journalists' plight provoked no real public outcry, they were forced out, and the station quickly taken over, turning a major page in Russia's post-communist history. It was an early lesson in Putin's wily trial-and-error tactics, and they're ongoing today, when I'm reminded that for American foreign policy, failure to stand up to Putin can lead to very bad consequences. My time spent traveling across Russia and to other former Soviet republics helped build the foundation of my career as a journalist, including as NPR correspondent in Moscow and the author of several books. Now we'll hear from other fellows about how their fellowships helped change their lives and advance their careers, with the purpose of sharing their knowledge to give us a better understanding of the world. Among them, Chinua Igawa, who spent her fellowship in Mexico, studying the lives of indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica.
My name is Chinua Igawa, and I'm a member of the Lummi Nation and was the first Native American to receive an ICWA Fellowship. I was an ICWA Fellow in 1997 to 1999 in Mexico and Guatemala. I went with the intent of learning about the Mayan coffee co-ops, and it was a changed plan because of the conflict that was going on between the Zapatistas and the Mexican government. And in Guatemala, the 36-year civil war was coming to an end. And so I spent a lot of my fellowship meeting with friends and family, indigenous peoples from Mayan communities, from places in southern Mexico and Chiapas. And I learned about the creation stories of the Mayan people and the wisdom keepers and the healers and the medicine people, and the responsibility as indigenous peoples to preserve and protect our languages and our cultures and our ways of life, and saw the similarities with my own people in North America, our indigenous peoples from the north, that the history seems to repeat itself throughout the world. And I feel that when I came home from my fellowship, I was really able to recognize that thread that had deepened during my fellowship, that I'm a person who is a bridge person. I understand the ancient teachings and I understand the modern world. Most recently, I wrote a book with my brother. This book is called The Whale Child, and the story is about the sacredness of water, the water of life, and what is happening to our oceans, and the responsibility that our children are needing to take care of because the generations above them have not done such a good job. Thank you so much, ICWA.
Good evening. My name is Paul Ray. I chair the Board of Trustees of the Institute of Current World Affairs, and I hope that you are enjoying our gala. Like many of the members of the Board of Trustees, I was a fellow myself in the Eastern Mediterranean from 1984 to 1986, based in Istanbul, covering mainly Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus, a part of the world that I have followed ever since. It has also been my privilege to serve on the Board of Trustees off and on for the last 37 years. This means that early on, I got to know some of the earliest fellows, John Hazard, Tom Blakemore, Phil Talbot, but it also means that over the last 37 years, it has been my privilege to know one generation after another of the fellows of the Institute of Current World Affairs. You have met some of them. Now you'll meet some more.
大家好，我是吴马泰。I'm Matthew Chitwood, and I was an ICWA Fellow in rural China from 2017 through 2019. For our virtual gathering today, I made a brief video about my time there, and my hope is that it gives you an even greater sense of appreciation for just how life-changing this experience was for me. Thanks to ICWA, I got to spend 2 very full years living in this remote mountain village, getting to know my 350 neighbors and learning about rural issues in China. This was such a valuable experience for me because though I'd been in China for 10 years already, a completely different China exists outside the megacities of Beijing and Shanghai. Rural people, still almost half China's population, face very different challenges, and I knew that if I didn't understand rural China, I didn't know China. 茶马古道 准备出发，今天出发。One of the most remarkable experiences of my fellowship was a motorcycle journey around Yunnan province, following the Tea-Horse Road. I took 10 weeks to trace this ancient trading route through the tea mountains of southern Yunnan, up into the Tibetan plateau, and on all sorts of roads in between. I also met all kinds of people, rice farmers and rubber harvesters, Tibetan pilgrims, and the very people reshaping the countryside around me. And I, of course, took time to play along the way and take in the local flora and fauna. The people I met described how their lives were changing, how new roads and tunnels and bridges were connecting them to new opportunities, how what was a day's journey is now a quick 30-minute trip, how the internet is revolutionizing ways of life, and how villages are transforming. They also spoke of the challenges ahead, of poverty, environmental degradation, and issues with local governance. For me, it was a journey of rich conversations and new perspectives, if not some new foods as well. It has allowed me to speak with insight to news outlets like NPR, Bloomberg, and Radio Free Asia, and also to publish with Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, and the American Interest. Most importantly, I made some new friends along the way. Thank you so much to ICWA and to all of the generous donors for making this life-changing experience possible.
Hello, I'm Dirk van der Wallen, former chairman and former fellow of the Institute in North Africa and Libya. And to me, the Institute has always been central to my career, allowing me to become an authority on Libya especially, and then the political advisor to the first UN representative to Libya after the revolution of 2011, and the director of the Carter Center Electoral Commission in Libya. The Institute mission is to identify talented individuals, then support them as fellows for 2 years of immersion in a country or region of their choice, and then bring them back to the United States to share their knowledge. It gives me great pleasure, therefore, to introduce to you one of our fellows who has done precisely all of that in a highly admirable fashion. The representative for the 7th Congressional District for the state of Washington in the House of Representatives, Pramila Jayapal.
Good evening, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and it is so wonderful to join the Institute of Current World Affairs family as you gather for your virtual gala. The Institute is a phenomenal organization, and it's an honor to be with you to honor your work and commit to growing it in the months and years ahead. Today, I have the tremendous privilege of being the first woman of color that Democrats in Washington state have ever sent to Congress, the first South Asian American woman ever elected to the House of Representatives, one of only 14 naturalized citizens serving in Congress, and one of less than 90 women of color to have ever been elected to Congress throughout American history. But long before being a Congress member, a state senator, or the founder of Washington's largest immigrant rights organization, I was a proud Institute of Current World Affairs fellow. Thanks to Peter Martin's ability to spot things that other people missed, the ICWA board, and the generosity of the Institute's donors, I had the opportunity to return to my home country of India from 1995 to 1997. The freedom that an ICWA fellowship provides is singularly important. I pursued topics that were timely and important to me, and I also had a chance to reflect deeply on core principles that would eventually become part and parcel of my work as an activist, organizer, and policymaker. That of intersectionality of the issues that face us, the role of grassroots movements in making policy change, and the simple fact that policy is people. There were so many ways in which my fellowship affected my work for decades to come. My time in Kerala, my birth state, where the public health system has been a model for the world for many decades now, helped shape my work in ensuring healthcare for everyone here in America. I spent time in Ladakh, where I got my first exposure to the cross-national border issues between India and China, including on issues related to Tibet. That certainly helped prepare me for the honor of 3 visits that I've had with His Holiness the Dalai Lama during my time in Congress, including my first visit to Dharamsala, where I had the deep privilege of speaking along with His Holiness and Speaker Pelosi before a massive crowd of over 10,000 Tibetans and passing some important legislation on these issues. The dipping of my toes into child labor, education, and women's issues contributed to the work I did as an activist on child labor policies to now the work I do in Congress on the Education and Labor Committee. But perhaps most valuable to that young, hungry self, I found myself in a different way. I learned to speak Hindi and sing Indian bhajans. I met women who were saving forests, fighting the early impacts of climate change, and standing up to violence. I saw government and non-governmental efforts mired by corruption and indifference, as well as projects and people steeped in compassion and excellence. I questioned injustice and inequity. I witnessed sheer unfairness, overwhelming poverty, and unbearable sadness that wrapped around millions of Indian villagers. But I also learned about love, generosity, and resilience, about community and fellowship, about the tools of nonviolent movements for peace and truth and justice, about the role of powerful Indian women leaders, from my own great aunt, who incidentally was the mentor for the aunt of our now first Indian American Vice President, Kamala Harris, to the activist women who have led grassroots movements in India. Thanks to my Institute Fellowship, I saw what was possible, and I saw my role in the world. It shaped my identity and work for decades to come, including my view of global development, aid, and security in the world. I've been so privileged to play leading roles in pushing in Congress for funding for Peace Corps fellows, keynoting the Global Leadership Conference. I've been a leader in Congress on issues of migration and immigration, understanding that we need global cross-border solutions to migration and immigration that focus on development, diplomacy, and collective and specialized knowledge of other parts of the world. And I've been a champion of democracy and what it takes to uphold it as a member of the House Judiciary Committee. The work we have to do as a country, and indeed as a world, is enormous. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, economic crisis, racial reckoning, and so much more that requires us to think creatively, boldly, and intersectionally. I firmly believe what the Institute has always believed, that America's success depends very much on our understanding of other parts of the world, that we need diplomats in every space who have lived in other places, speak other languages, know issues from a personal perspective, and can be our translators and our bridges. Never has this been more clear than now. So please know how important the work you do is in shaping leaders of the future. And as we celebrate your many successes and pledge to do the important, necessary, and urgent work that remains, please know that this ICWA former fellow will always be standing right alongside of you. Ever so grateful that you took a chance on me decades ago and helped bring me to where I am today. Thank you, Institute of Current World Affairs, for all you do.
Ahead of ICWA's upcoming 100th anniversary, we've launched 2 new fundraising initiatives to secure the Institute for its second century. We've just kicked off our Centennial Global Council membership program. It offers a number of ICWA benefits. And we've started the Legacy Circle for those making a planned gift. Please email us or visit our website to learn more.
Hello, greetings from Bamako, Mali. This is Hannah Armstrong. I was an ICWA Fellow in 2011 to 2013 in the Sahel region. It was a great and very exciting time working on looking at different types of crisis and challenges that the states faced. And as it happened, I arrived in a very turbulent time and was able to have some really interesting experiences in northern Niger, northern Mali, and parts of Mauritania, Burkina Faso, and even Algeria. Today I'm a senior Sahel analyst with International Crisis Group and very much working on the issues that I began developing as an ICWA Fellow. I look at crisis in the Sahel region, focusing particularly on the Mali-Niger border where the Islamic State has been gaining ground, and states are both fighting sort of a counterinsurgency and counter-terror battles. And I just want to wish you all an excellent gala and say I'm so grateful for the support, and big greetings from Bamako, Mali.
My ICWA Fellowship focused on how external pressures and threats impacted reform in Lebanon and Syria. Today, I'm a senior fellow with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and a former director for Syria on the National Security Council and senior advisor in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs, U.S. Department of State. Thank you, ICWA.
Good evening. My name is Christian Mehta. I am a trustee of the Institute of Current World Affairs, and it is my privilege to pay tribute to the memory of an ICWA fellow, Phillips Talbot, someone I had the privilege to know for many years. Phillips covered the Indian independence movement in the 1930s and 40s. He went on to become President Kennedy's Undersecretary of State for Near East and South Asian Affairs, went on to become President of the Asia Society, and before that, Ambassador to Greece.
My original assignment was to try to learn something about India. Very specific. I was taken to the leader's tent, and without being told whom I was to see, was asked to come into a particular section. And there sat Nehru, Well, of course, I recognized him immediately. Well, we talked, and then he said, well, why don't you stay here in the leaders camp for the next 3 days, and we'll talk when I have time. Well, he's terribly busy. But on the other hand, during those 3 days, he gave me a kind of précis of his book, The Discovery of India, the background of India, the history, the culture of India, and so on and so forth. Remarkable opportunity.
Now, this poster that you see to my left is a poster that reflects a very interesting historic time when President Kennedy sent Phil to India to negotiate on a peaceful settlement of the Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan. The Indian political parties that did not want a resolution that would favor Pakistan in any way organized a number of demonstrations to prevent the negotiations from being successful. And this poster says, Yankee Talbot, go home, Kashmir not for sale. I remember that period well, growing up in India and reading about those demonstrations when Phil Talbot visited India at that time. There are a number of contributions that Phil made to history, to society, and to global peace. And all of it was a result of the ICWA fellowship that he got that turned him in the direction of South Asia as his specialty. He wanted to go originally to Europe as a foreign correspondent, but ICWA guided him to go to Asia. He became an expert on Indian and Pakistan and Chinese affairs and had a very successful career after that. And Phil remained connected to ICWA because he knew that it was that experience that changed his values and his life.
Hi, I'm Ari Shapiro, one of the hosts of NPR's All Things Considered, sending my congratulations to my friends at the Institute for Current World Affairs, celebrating 96 years of advancing American understanding of the world. ICWA Fellows are given the time and resources to explore countries and regions through self-designed programs of travel, thought, and writing about globally important issues. They develop new ways of perceiving, navigating, and improving our highly globalized world, and they share their knowledge through monthly dispatches, podcasts, and webinars from the field, all available at the Institute's website. With the gutting of U.S. news organizations and their foreign news bureaus, providing understanding and context about fast-moving developments around the world is more important than ever. As you've seen tonight, that is what ICWA's fellows do, becoming some of our nation's leading journalists, scholars, diplomats, and activists, and making vital contributions to their fields. So I hope you will join me in supporting and congratulating ICWA on its many years of good work. Here's to many more to come.
ICWA is committed to exploring the full breadth of the human experience, not least the arts.
In the mid-1960s, Karen and I were living in Paris on her Fulbright grant. We had an unheated apartment, and on Sundays we'd go to the street markets, and we had just enough cash to buy 1 carrot, a single potato, an onion, a Parisienne, a morceau of cheese, perhaps a peach. Against this marginal backdrop, the Institute appeared, apparition-like. There was a single question. If you could be anywhere, where would you be? What a prospect for people such as us who had such limited prospects. We embraced the chance completely, almost in an instant, in one sleepless night. Shortly, we were in Tokyo, confronting its language, its mores, wonders, and shocks, buried in a cultural avalanche while raising our Japanese-born daughter and mounting various musical events. Musicians that we were, we bonded with Japanese artists of all sorts. Some became lifelong friends, one a colleague here in San Diego. We acquired a radically rotated picture of how the world could be experienced. Once repositioned in this way, one can't recover innocence. Unexpected intersections abounded. One reader of our monthly newsletters was Buckminster Fuller, and we came to know him. We were blessedly buffeted. Fellowship complete, we settled into coastal life near San Diego. Our perspective on things large and small contrasted with those of our neighbors and new colleagues. So reorientation into the American way was not straightforward. A fellowship fully committed to alters one. 5 decades later, I realized the degree to which our fellowship influenced our sense of the world's unending contrasts, of how differently time can flow, depending, the value of attentiveness, the inescapable utility of conventions, accepting the contradictory purposes in a Zen koan, respecting the perspective of the other. The fellowship shaped so much in our subsequent lives. It caused me to vow that each time we relocated, the character of the new surroundings would guide a new creative project. In 1989, for example, in Amherst, where Emily Dickinson surreptitiously presided, I composed Whispers Out of Time, which won me the Pulitzer Prize in music and initiated a collaborative relationship between me and the enigmatic master poet, John Ashbery.
Hello everyone, my name is Bacchetti Otun Buogo, and I'm a former fellow of the Institute of Current World Affairs. My fellowship was in the study of primary healthcare delivery systems in 3 developing countries, and these are Costa Rica, Cuba, Kerala State in India. I wanted to learn how less developed countries have achieved so much for improving the health of their populations. The Institute of Current World Affairs Fellowship allowed me that opportunity to embed myself in the health cultures of these three countries. I have learned so much, and the experience that I gained in those countries have enriched my knowledge. I today work as a consultant geriatrician and general physician at Maidstone Hospital in Kent in the United Kingdom. I thank the Institute very much for what they have done.
Hi, I'm Susan Sterner.
And I'm Tyrone Turner.
Our fellowships took us to the northeast of Brazil, where for 2 years I looked into the status of women and the economic and cultural issues that shape their lives. Tyrone investigated youth culture and the challenges of childhood.
It was a really transformational experience for the both of us. As photojournalists, it released us from deadline journalism and gave us the chance to really take deep dives into the communities where we were spending time.
It continued to be transformational after our fellowships on all levels, from parenthood to what we feel is a committed and informed citizen, and in our professional lives. As a documentary photographer, when I'm out in the field, I feel what I learned from my ICWA fellowship every day. And when I'm in the classroom with young photojournalism students and visual storytellers, I encourage them to slow down and take a deep look at all of the issues as they build new and exciting reporting.
I would say that it actually redefined our careers, and it allowed me to collaborate with National Geographic and do workshops with youth around the world. And it also really impacted the role that I have now, which is as visuals editor and photojournalist with the NPR station WAMU.
I mean, really, to be an ICWA fellow is pretty awesome. It changed our lives, and it's changed the way that we report and bring stories into the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've sent fellows to places big and small around the world to examine issues we believe to be important and interesting. We'll also continue to design fellowships targeted to big issues, such as the environment, healthcare, and human rights, including LGBTQ+ rights.
Hi, my name is Fabrice Sedar. I am a lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender global human rights activist. I currently serve as the Managing Director for Global Equality Initiative in Out Leadership, a think tank on LGBTQ+ rights based in New York City, but covering the entire world. During these 20 years in public service, I have gained an understanding of how crucial it is for United States foreign policy to be informed in a nuanced approach. I believe that ICWA, for the past 90+ years, has played a key role in building a pipeline of talent that brings news and information on the complexity of the world we live in to the American public and to decision makers. In fact, before I joined ICWA, I had the opportunity to witness the role that it played in informing the foreign policy of the United States. When Robbie Corey-Boulay, one of our fellows, went to West Africa and brought back to us a very nuanced picture of the situation of LGBTQ+ people in West Africa and the way we can support the movement for equality in that part of the world. This is why I am extremely privileged to announce today the David Mixner Fellowship on LGBTQ+ rights. David Mixner is turning 75 years old today. He is a key figure of the American movement for LGBTQ+ equality, but he also has had a tremendous impact on the entire world. This fellowship will mark his 75th birthday, but also ensure that ICWA contributes to one of the key components of the American foreign policy under the Biden-Harris administration, by ensuring that one of our fellows help us get an understanding of where the movement is at in a specific part of the world. I hope that you will join us in celebrating ICWA, but also in contributing to the David Mixner Fellowship.
Andrew Weil here. It's a pleasure to talk to the Institute of Current World Affairs. I can't tell you how important the experience of the fellowship was for me. Those years that I spent from 1971 to 1975 really shaped my ideas about health and healing in the natural world. Gave me a chance to become fluent in Spanish, to really get to know some of the Latin American cultures and the ways that they manage successfully to deal with psychoactive plants and drugs that influence my ideas about drug policy. Those years have been just foundational to my intellectual development, and I remain very grateful to the Institute for sponsoring me, and any way I can be supportive of your mission, I am happy to do. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Gedman. I'm a trustee with the Institute of Current World Affairs. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening, and with Executive Director Greg Pfeiffer, Rebecca, and your team, all the marvelous work you do, we are indebted. And it's my pleasure and distinct honor at this time to introduce to you Norm Eisen, a keynote speaker for the evening. Norm, you are a statesman diplomat, you are a lawyer, public intellectual, you've served in the White House, you've served as U.S. Ambassador to the Czech Republic, and you're a friend. I can't think of anybody on such an occasion as we have this evening who can speak to the vision and values and purpose of ICWA like you can. And I know that I join everybody in saying welcome. We're delighted, and we look forward to hearing from you this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in tonight for the Institute of Current World Affairs' first virtual gala. Despite our distance from each other, tonight promises to be a joyous occasion as the Institute celebrates its 96th year of advancing American understanding of world cultures and affairs. Before I begin, please allow me to extend special thanks to your trustee and my dear friend, Jeff Gedman, for introducing me, to the wonderful Greg Pfeiffer for inviting me to address you all tonight, to the board, the trustees and fellows who make the Institute's work possible, and finally, to the Institute's steadfast supporters. Your mission is dear to both my heart and my work, and it is a privilege and an honor to know and to work with you. I am the child of European parents who survived the Holocaust and came to the United States to pursue a better life, one free from persecution and one which empowered them to chase their dreams. So I have a profound appreciation for the principles that America has long stood for, including equality, liberty, and opportunity. Those values have suffused our government, society, and our culture since this nation's founding. And they've helped the United States to evolve from a collection of remote British colonies to the most powerful nation in the world. Through our own example, those tenets have inspired people across the globe. After a challenging 4-year interregnum that reminded us how much we had in common with strugglers for democracy everywhere, those tenets will inspire once again our Constitution, our vibrant civil society, our balanced system of self-government. These institutions have seen us through, and their resilience is a new kind of example, perhaps a slightly more complicated one, for others to study. As ambassador to the Czech Republic, a country where so many other and even more epic struggles of democracy versus authoritarianism, openness against intolerance, and freedom or oppression have played out over the past century, I saw the power of the U.S. example at its best. I witnessed firsthand how democracy-minded lawmakers, activists, and individuals use the U.S. paradigm as a guide in their own efforts and welcomed American leadership in and after World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and its aftermath. And we learned from our Czech partners as well. That status, our traditional and I hope now restored heft as an ally and a friend on the global stage, is a sacred privilege that must be appreciated and closely guarded. As we've seen over the past 4 years, It is incredibly fragile, that position of the United States. And if we do not safeguard it, not only our domestic situation, but our obligation to democracy everywhere around the world, that democracy will be at risk. Luckily, we now have the chance to rectify the damage of the past 4 years and to reestablish American moral leadership in the world. As an attorney dedicated to the Constitution and as an ethicist devoted to transparency, accountability, and reform, I believe deeply that that process starts at home. To convince the rest of the world, which is watching, of our return to our better angels, we need to address the issues that these past years have exposed in the United States. We cannot resume our place as a global leader until the world sees that we're following our own example. To do that, we need to restore ethics and the rule of law in the US federal government. The destruction of the past 4 years exposed the weaknesses that could be exploited once more if we don't address them now. It's not glamorous, but we need to begin our return to leadership around the world by doing so at home, by fixing the ethics plumbing of our American democracy, closing conflict of interest loopholes, protecting inspectors general and whistleblowers, removing big money from our American politics. We must prioritize transparency across the federal government and reduce corruption in both the public and the private sectors. These and other badly needed reforms under consideration in Congress and in the executive branch will restore the rule of law, restore ethics, help keep our home in better order while we repair our relationship with the rest of the world. On the international stage, the past 4 years have left our longtime allies doubting our commitment to both them and the global democratic project, and with some reason. We must return to the model that made the United States a great friend to have in the world, re-engaging, not reneging on international pacts and treaties. These institutions and accomplishments, from the Paris Agreement to the World Health Organization, were all realized with the help of the United States, and our absence from them has reverberated across the globe. Of course, we have to also make a convincing case to the American people about why the rest of the world has such an impact on our own situation, educating Americans about nations and issues seemingly far from our borders, and demonstrating to them why events in Wuhan or Damascus or Paris matters to New York and Topeka and Sacramento. In the age of COVID-19, making this case is both simpler and infinitely more important. That is why the Institute's work is so invaluable, of course, and why you are essential to restoring American moral leadership in the world. A more educated and intellectually curious public is more likely to choose leaders who believe in the US's historical commitment to making the world a better place through collaboration and engagement, especially in an era when isolationist political and social forces cast international cooperation as anti-American. The efforts of the Institute to illustrate the overwhelming benefits of cultural understanding are crucial. Without that wisdom in our body politic, the American moral project within and without our borders will be forever threatened. That is why I believe the Institute is an indispensable force for good in the world, and why I have been so honored to speak to all of you tonight. Thank you, everyone, for having me, and to everyone watching for joining the virtual festivities. Be well and stay safe.
My personal hero, Norm Eisen, has described where and why ICWA's efforts are more needed now than ever. And for a slightly different perspective is Ian Bremmer, founder of the Eurasia Group, and another very distinguished friend of the Institute's.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be talking to all of you at the Institute for Current World Affairs, virtually, of course, but everything is virtual because we're stuck in this coronavirus. Look, they asked me if I would spend a couple minutes talking about our top risks for 2021, but the fact is that in a coronavirus environment, the worst crisis of our lifetimes, everybody's pretty down with the headlines. So as someone who thinks about the world and geopolitics, I thought I would give you a quick summary of some of the best ways that we are taking advantage of the opportunities that come out of this horrible crisis. I'll give you a few. First, the obvious one is vaccines. Where we are today in terms of how many, how effective, and how quickly these vaccines have been developed and can work and can roll out. I mean, of all of the epidemiologists, world-class epidemiologists I've spoken to over the last year, none of them dared hope that we'd be in this position. With J&J and Moderna and Pfizer and the Chinese and the Indians and even the Russians, though we don't trust their data, it's pretty astonishing. And it's going to get us back to something that feels more like living in the developed world this year and in the developing world end of this year, next year. And that's a wonderful thing. And of course, the technology that comes from those vaccines will matter in lots of other fields as well. Secondly, Europe. The Europeans, unlike the financial crisis and the Eurozone crisis in 2008, 2009, 2010, when it was largely the wealthy countries beating up on the poor countries, squeezing them down in terms of austerity, or else they'll be kicked out. This time around, they take a really big crisis and they say, we need to work together. And that led to the biggest redistribution that we've seen that we could imagine from the wealthy countries to the poor countries. Effectively, a Marshall Plan for countries like Greece and Spain and Italy and even Poland and Hungary that haven't been so politically aligned with Brussels or Berlin, but recognizing that this opportunity is too good to pass up. And what that means is that all of the populism, the anti-establishment sentiment that we're suffering from so much in the U.S. and has been such a problem inside Europe is actually hibernating for a while because the Europeans are getting their act together. Yeah, vaccinations are, slower than they'd like and certainly slower than the U.S. and the U.K., but ultimately Europe is stronger than it would have been without coronavirus. Let's also appreciate what Madame Merkel is doing in her last year as German Chancellor. Speaking of that, smooth transitions, especially coming out of the U.S. with the disaster we've had in January 6th and almost half of the population thinking that the election was stolen and rigged, even though it wasn't. In Germany and Japan, these are the two largest democratic economies after the United States. They had the strongest leaders that they've had in decades with Abe and with Merkel, and they're going through transitions, and they're really smooth. They're not making news. The economic policies, the diplomatic policies, they're not going to change very much, and it's not going to be very controversial. And sometimes no news is good news. This is one of those cases where you're able to have these big, important transitions and not all that much changes. At a time of massive geopolitical instability, let's be thankful for that. Climate. I am more optimistic in 2021 about where we are heading on climate than at any point in decades. We have a better shot of limiting global warming to 2 or 2.5 degrees Celsius as opposed to 3.5 or 4. And for the long term, the impact for the future, for the kids, for the global economy, for other species is massive. And yes, that came because of coronavirus. It's lower fossil fuel prices, meaning less influence for the oil and gas companies. It's heavier influence for the tech companies that are more interested in pro-sustainability policies. It is Trump not getting a second term, and he would have had a second term almost certainly if there wasn't coronavirus. Instead, it's Biden. The biggest policy difference between the two is on climate as opposed to fossil fuels. The European sustainability program is very much oriented towards all the relief that they're providing. The Chinese saw the writing on the wall, and so they got ahead of net zero as well with Xi Jinping. And the Brits and the Japanese, not wanting to be on the wrong side of Biden and everybody else, are moving as well. So that's absolutely a better position to be in, driven as well by the markets and some long-term thinking and folks that hold portfolios and say fossil fuels isn't where it's at. Final point, technology. This crisis, coronavirus, is as bad as it is, and as much as it's hitting the poor and the undereducated, and we need to take policy decisions that will help reduce that inequality, Imagine if it wasn't coronavirus. Imagine if you had a crisis of this scale, but it was a cyber attack. And instead of hitting all of the brick and mortar companies, it actually hit the most innovative companies. It hit the banks, and it hit social media, and it hit everything with a chip in it. That would have so hindered innovation. And instead, the companies that are doing the best are the ones that are most oriented for the 21st century. And the knock-on effects of that for improving investments into things that will actually lead to more efficiency over time, like distance learning and distance medicine and greater AI efficiencies in agriculture, that's a big deal and should make us more optimistic about the future. Look, I could have done 10 minutes on all of the things that aren't going so well, but you can read our top risks for that. Instead, you're celebrating ICWA as well you should. Why not some positive things? And so, look, I'm delighted to be joining you. I hope that you're going to continue to support this great organization, both the mission as a whole and especially the fellows. It's so critically important to have people going around the world and bringing unbiased information in an increasingly very polarized global political atmosphere to people and helping bring the world a little closer together. I know that's part of my mission, and I know it's part of yours. So be good and take it easy.
My ICWA fellowship focused on the impact of urbanization on China's social, political, and economic development. I saw the courage of everyday citizens exercising their free speech rights in a country where there was none. ICWA gave me the freedom and support I needed to pursue such topics in depth. And today, as the Global Product Experience Lead at Google News, I lead a team that supports free speech and the hard work of journalists everywhere. Thank you, ICWA, for empowering me to pursue a mission-driven career.
Hi, my name is Neri Zilber. My ICWA fellowship was in Israel from 2011 to 2013, where I focused primarily on contemporary Israeli politics and society and economics. Today, I am an independent journalist and analyst based in Tel Aviv and continuing to immerse myself and write about the rough and tumble world of Holy Land politics. Thank you, ICWA.
Hello, my name is Kay Dilday. My ICWA fellowship was in Morocco and France. I was writing about the integration of immigrant communities in France, mostly communities from North Africa, but some sub-Saharan Africa. My fellowship was transformative. It was invigorating. It was difficult at times, and it was life-changing. And it's influenced the way I think and the way I approach everything I do. Currently, I'm a journalist, and I decided that I wanted to help people who were immigrating to this country. And I'm hoping to be an immigration lawyer. I'm in my first year at CUNY. I'm still writing as I go to law school, and I'm terribly grateful to ICWA. As I said, it was a life-changing fellowship, and I just can't tell you how valuable it is, and I hope it continues forevermore.
Thank you again for sharing this evening with us and your support of and enthusiasm for the Institute's mission. We're embarking on an important new time, expanding our work in the Institute's next century. In addition to securing our unique fellowships, sending outstanding young women and men to places where there are no American foreign correspondents, to examine topics you just don't hear much about anywhere else, our targeted fellowships will be dedicated to addressing big issues, and we'll discuss them in Fellows Dispatches and our podcasts and webinars and talks. I'm humbled to head an organization that's helped produce so many exceptional careers, and I ask you to join our work with your financial support. We close with a harp solo performed by the accomplished ICWA trustee, Dr. Constance Whiteside.
Thank you, Greg, for that kind introduction. I'm delighted to be a trustee of ICWA because of the close correlation between its mission, the Fellows projects, and the work that I do in international relations. As a harpist, I perform on historically modern harps, and I've chosen a work to share with you composed by Kim Robertson, as she exemplifies the qualities of the Fellows that we see, that dedication to succeed in challenging fields and also to offer something of worth to the world. I'm performing Moonrise on my beautiful concert harp built in 1923. I hope you enjoy the serenity and the inspiration found in this gorgeous work. Thank you.